Welcome to the Rewards Master. Today we're going to examine credit cards in general and some of the frustrating things that once a person gets into the credit card world, and especially when you get one of the more premium cards with a high annual fee, some of the frustrations that just kind of rear their ugly head after you really get into it that you might not realize at the beginning. So if you would, hit the like and subscribe button, and let's kind of explore these frustrations together. Now, there may be more than just 10 bad credit card features that'll drive you crazy, but these are the ones that came to my mind first and foremost. And this comes from a person who has over 30 credit cards and has been doing this at a high level for many, many years. And I've just observed this, and some of them are true across the board if you have a no annual fee card. Some of them are true with a mid-level card, and some of them are true only at the high end. But across the board, I think with any financial product, but especially with credit cards, there are those frustrations that are just going to gnaw at you. So I have 10 of them that just kind of came to my mind, and one additional bonus that really isn't about the credit card itself, but certainly does impact everyone who uses their cards to try to get great outsized value. So let's dive into the list together. The first thing that I notice when I talk about my frustrations in regard to credit cards would have to be foreign transaction fees. Now, a lot of cards advertise they don't have any foreign transaction fees, and that's great. But other cards, and some of the best earning cards on the market, I'm thinking things like some of the Freedom cards and some of the other no annual fee cards from some of the issuers that are great daily drivers in a person's regular everyday credit card setup. Some of those cards have a 3% foreign transaction fee. So what that means is if you go overseas and you're traveling and you use that card in Mexico or in Europe or wherever you may be, thinking, oh, I'm going to get 5 points per dollar on this purchase. Well, you may get the 5 points per dollar, but then you have that rude awakening of right there on your credit card statement, you have a 3% foreign transaction fee. Now, to be fair, the credit card companies disclose when they have this, but does everybody really pay attention? And when we get used to using our cards everywhere, we don't really think about it. This is the card we use for this particular thing. So those foreign transaction fees, you got to be careful. Make sure you look at your card and find out whether it has a foreign, you can Google it or whatever it may be, or look at the terms and conditions, but you don't want to use a card with a foreign transaction fee, especially if you go on a trip and spend $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 and then come home and get stuck with that negates all of your rewards. So that's the first thing, is foreign transaction fees. The second thing that really frustrates me, and this is really only on the high-end cards that give some kind of lounge access, and that would be either some of the lounge cards that are associated with the airlines themselves, like American Airlines has their executive card that gives access to Admirals Clubs. Delta has their reserve card that gives access to the Delta Sky Clubs, and United has a United Club card that gives access to their lounges. But there's also cards like the American Express Platinum that gives access to Priority Pass and also to the Centurion lounges and Delta Sky Clubs. Then there's things like the Reserve card with Chase that gives access to the Chase Sapphire lounges and to Priority Pass. Now we've got the City Strata Elite that gives 4 passes to American Airlines lounges and also to Priority Pass. And of course the Venture X that gives. So we have all these different cards that promise lounge access, and it's great until it isn't. And what I mean by that is that lounge restrictions can be a major frustration in the credit card world because you're excited, I pay this high fee, I want to go to this lounge. You go and you got your player 2 or your spouse or your kids or whatever, and you get there and the line is an hour to even get in. And then they tell you, oh, well, your access doesn't include any guests, so they'll be $59 a piece. and you're like, why am I even paying for this? Now, you can, of course, know what the restrictions are before you go, but I have seen many people walk up to a lounge, hand over their card, confidently expecting to get in and have a great time, and be hit with either a long wait or, more often than not, restrictions that they aren't allowed to bring in the guests that they thought they did. So to me, that is an incredible frustration with these high dollar cards, because you pay so much for them and you really want the benefits. The third frustration that just makes me want to pull my hair out sometimes is these unusable credits that they offer. Now, when I say unusable, technically you could use them, but the credit card company, and they're not fools, they're doing this on purpose. The bank is trying to make it hard to use the credit and to get your money back. Some great examples of this are my American Airlines executive card has a $10 a month Lyft credit. Well, that sounds easy to use. I just take a Lyft ride every month. No, because it only kicks in after you've taken 3 Lyft rides. So it kicks in on your 4th Lyft ride. That is a ridiculous and really high bar to have to pass to get $10 back. But I wonder how many people at all are even using that credit. And that's their intention. I promise you, that's their intention. It just makes me frustrated. And I think this is true on a lot of other cards as well. Which leads us to the 4th frustration on this list, which is exceptions to the way that credit cards code, or I guess we could say exceptions to merchant codes. There are a number of these in the credit card world, but probably the most famous, in the most documented, and the one where more people experience frustration is in regard to grocery stores versus big box stores versus, general merchants, and particularly this has to do with places like Sam's Club and Costco and Target and Walmart. So you get this card and it has this great multiplier for grocery stores, and you shop at Walmart because Walmart is the most frequented grocery store in America. I mean, that's where people buy their groceries. A lot of people buy their groceries at Target. A lot of people buy their groceries at big box stores. So you go and use it, you're supposed to get 3 or 4 or 5 cents per point or points per dollar. And then you get there and you look at your statement and you got 1. Why? Yes, you bought groceries, maybe hundreds of dollars of groceries, but you bought it at a store that they consider to be a general merchandise store. And they do that on purpose. So for a lot of people who buy their groceries, those grocery multipliers just don't work at all because of the games that they're playing with coding, making those merchants. And I get it. The reason they're doing that is they don't want you buying a kayak at Walmart and getting your grocery multiplier. I get it. But you would think they would have the technology to know what you're buying is grocery and what isn't, but apparently not. Or it's just easy for them not to code those stores at all as grocery. So that can be a great frustration. The 5th one that comes to my mind are activation requirements. Now, what I mean by that is that a lot of cards have really good features, but you got to go in and you've got to activate them first. A good example would be some of the credits and things on the American Express Platinum card. You've got to go in first and you've got to activate them. Sometimes you've got to choose things like which is going to be my preferred airline. But then even on some of the cheap cards, like the Chase Freedom Flex, you've got these rotating categories, but you have to go in every quarter and you have to activate those categories. And it's just a way that the credit card companies are trying to get some breakage. I mean, maybe people will forget to activate it, and then they won't get their extra points. And it's frustrating because it's just one more thing to have to remember among a lot of things to have to remember in this credit card world. The 6th thing that comes to mind, and it isn't a major frustration, but I have been slightly irritated by it before, and that is if you want to transfer points from one of your credit card ecosystems over to one of the partners, let's say you're transferring over to Air France or to Air Canada or whatever it may be, they have a minimum transfer requirement of usually 1,000 points. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but sometimes you don't need 1,000 points. Sometimes you just need to top up over and you need 300 or 400 or 761 or whatever. And you don't want to burn your points and just have those extra 300 or 400 just sitting there and you're probably not going to be able to use them. So to me, that's a slight but a real frustration at times when you really need to transfer just a few points over to have those minimum point transfer requirements. The next one on the list for me, and this one's a little bit bigger than the last one, and that is confusing transfer partners. And what I mean by that is some of the airline transfer partners that aren't the domestic ones. I mean, we're not talking about Citi's AA partnership or the Delta partnership with American Express or United or Southwest with Chase. I'm meaning the ones that you can really get great outsized value, and you can. Things like Avianca or Turkish. I mean, they seem on paper like you can get great value, and you really can get great value. But sometimes dealing with their web page or their customer service or just their procedures in order to get your great value is just a nightmare. And I mean, you can go on their webpage and you'll have phantom award availability or whatever. So the credit card companies let you know they have this great transfer partner, and in theory, potentially it can be great, but it can be so confusing and so problematic and difficult, a high bar to be able to pass to be able to get that great outsized value. So to me, that's a constant frustration as well. This next one is really only about American Express, but it is frustrating, and that is domestic airline transfer fees. So American Express seems to be the only one that charges a fee to transfer, and it's not a huge fee, but it can add up. I mean, if you transfer a lot, it can be $100, and they charge this fee only to transfer to United States domestic programs. So that would be programs like Delta, Southwest, and Hawaiian. I know this because I transferred a lot to Hawaiian to get them over to Alaska recently. And I paid quite a bit, well over $100 in transfer fees. And no other bank program does that. And American Express only does it with the domestic ones. Why do they do that with the domestic ones when Chase doesn't do it with United or with Southwest or whatever it may be? So I do not know why they do that. So they do it, and it's frustrating. Nobody has an answer as to the reason. I guess it's just for American Express to milk a little bit more money out of their customers, which is frustrating. The ninth thing on this list is calendar year versus card anniversary regarding different credits and when they start and when they expire. When you start to get a lot of cards that have a lot of these things and they're all different, it can be just so frustrating. So I have some cards that are like, yeah, you get this benefit, like with the Capital One Venture X. It's a card anniversary $300 credit. Okay, so if your anniversary comes due in October, you got from October to October. But then a whole bunch of other credits, which I greatly prefer, are calendar year credits. So most of the Citi credits I have are calendar year. So they start in January, they end in December. Next January, you get them again. If you don't use them by December, you lose them. So when you have some cards that are on a calendar year and some that are on card anniversary, it's like which is which, and it can be very, very frustrating. So that's the ninth thing on my list, which leads us to the last of the true frustrations regarding credit cards themselves. And to me, that's call-in features or call-in requirements. Now, oh man, this can be so frustrating. There are a lot of cards that offer these supposedly and potentially great benefits, but you've got to call in to use them. The Ritz card is a great example of that. You get this $300 travel credit on a $450 annual fee, but you gotta call Chase and talk to a person and hope that they credit it for that, and it's just a hassle. There's also the American Express Hilton Aspire. I have that card, and it's got an annual free night certificate that is crazy good value, but you've got to call American Express and Hilton, and you've got to be able to have them physically apply it to your upcoming stay. These call-in features are so antiquated. Why can't they just do a chat thing? Why can't you just do it in the app? It is so very frustrating in a world of texting and apps and online? Why do we have to go through this? And why do they even want to pay somebody to have to do that? But they do. I figure it's also trying to get breakage. So all of those things are very, very frustrating. Now, I promised you a bonus, and here's the bonus. And actually, this bonus frustrates me, and it's just me, but it frustrates me more than any of these others on this list. And it doesn't really have to do with the credit cards. It has to do with merchants that take credit cards. And that is merchants upcharging credit card users. It drives me insane. And it doesn't usually happen with national chains. So like, for instance, if I eat at a local restaurant here, they might charge 3% only if I use a credit card. But if I go to Texas Roadhouse, they won't charge anything for using a credit card. And I guess the reason it frustrates me is I understand that there is a fee associated with the credit card, okay? I get that. But what I don't understand is how the national chains can build it into their price, but local places can't, but yet their prices are sometimes higher, usually higher than the national chains. They can't just raise their price by 3% for everybody. And why it frustrates me is it would make sense to me to not penalize the cash people if that was the majority of their business. But I've asked them, and I ask them, I say, so do most of your people pay in cash or with credit card? And they said, oh, the 90% of our people pay with credit card. And I said, so you're penalizing the 90% rather than the 10% that pay with cash? Why can't you just make all the prices the same? Just raise all the prices by 3%. It may not bug you at all. I'm not against small businesses. I eat a lot of small business. I still go there. It just drives me crazy. Just why do that? Why have that extra charge? Just raise your price by 3%. Nobody'd even care. But I mean, I suppose that's just my own little soapbox, but it drives me absolutely crazy. Well, what are some of the things that frustrate you about using a credit card? Well, I'm sure that I missed some on this list, but if you have any more to add, put them down in the comments below. If you think that I maybe put one on the list that isn't frustrating, put that down below. And if you would, check out my channel membership, just $2.99 a month. You can cancel anytime. And also, please hit the like and subscribe button. And I will see you here next time.